Young GuiFei was one of the most beautiful and renowned women in Imperial Chinese history. Because of her beauty, the emperor neglected his duties, and the Tang dynasty was greatly weakened by a rebellion that ensued. Even though she was the wife of his son, the emperor was smitten with her beauty, and eventually, he made her his imperial consort. Yang enjoyed a lavish life after becoming the consort of Emperor Xuanzong. However, she soon became the victim of courtly intrigue, which ultimately forced her to commit suicide. Young GuiFei was one of the few curvaceous women in Chinese history to have been considered beautiful. She was born in 719 to a high-status family. Her father died while she was very young, and she was raised in the house of her uncle. A few years after her father's death, 16-year-old Yang married one of Emperor Xuanzong's many sons, the 16-year-old Li Mai, Prince of Shou, and went to live in the imperial palace. It was when Yang was 19 that she met the 53-year-old Emperor Xuanzong. He was so enamored of her beautiful face and voluptuous figure that he had to have her as his consort. But by then, she was already married to his own son. Consequently, he decided to make the marriage of Yang Yuhuan null and void, as he feared that there might be an outrage by the court due to taking his son's wife. Soon, the emperor commanded Yang, his daughter-in-law, to leave her husband and practice Taoism at an imperial temple. This was to buy him some time, as he planned to make Yang Yuhuan his concubine without upsetting the court. Yang Yuhuan resided in the Daoist temple, which was on palace grounds. Under this disguise, she would make nightly visits to the emperor's bedchamber, which she would do over the period of 7 years. Few years later, Prince Li Mai was given another wife, and Yang Yuhuan was shifted officially to the harem of Emperor Xuanzong. There she was honored with the title GuiFei, which meant that she was the imperial consort who was the favorite of the emperor. The emperor was completely infatuated with Young GuiFei and elevated her above thousands of concubines to their dismay. He constructed for her a luxurious palace, changing its name to Huaging Hot Spring, so that she can spend many languorous hours bathing there to keep her skin fresh. Now that Young GuiFei received all the attention from the emperor and had no rivals, Young GuiFei lived a life of extravagance and indulgence. She had 700 silk weavers and embroidery workers that were specifically assigned to make her garments. Every time she rode a horse, the most powerful eunuch in the palace would hold the bridle for himself. Emperor Xuanzong doted on his consort. He would send imperial edicts for officials to bring lychees from faraway cities for Young GuiFei by rapid horses, so that they would be fresh by the time they were served to Young GuiFei, as she loved fresh lychees. The rapid haste of the journey made the officials extremely fatigued. Young GuiFei also received lavish gifts from the emperor. One of them was an exotic white bird. Young GuiFei and the emperor also shared a love of the arts, and she wrote several musical compositions for him. She was a great dancer and player of the pipa, a musical instrument similar to a lute. Soon, Young GuiFei's 3 sisters were rewarded honorable titles and plenty of treasures and money. They obtained more and more power, and most imperial consorts and honorable princesses had to show them respect and compliance. Despite their arrogance and disrespect to royal members, and they had done many things that crossed the line, the emperor never blamed them. As long as beautiful Young GuiFei was happy, there was nothing to complain about. Young GuiFei's cousin was particularly favored, becoming the prime minister. However, historians believe that the cousin was ill-suited for the prime minister's role and precipitated the decline of the empire and rebellion. He kept promoting officials close to him and insisted on initiating 2 failed wars against the Nanjiao kingdom, which weakened Tang's military strength. He pretty much abused his power and caused a massive loss to the empire. At the same time, however, the emperor was enjoying life and spending so much time with Young that his subjects and court officials must wait hours each morning before they can meet with him about work. The emperor became so obsessed with her that he neglected his empire. Even though Young GuiFei was the emperor's favorite, this does not mean that Young GuiFei's relationship with the emperor was all rosy. There were at least 2 occasions that the emperor showed displeasure with her and banished her from the palace. The reason for her first banishment was because she showed jealousy when the emperor took an interest in one of the palace ladies. She was sent to live with her cousin. However, this banishment was brief, as the emperor realized that he could never live without Yang, so she was soon called back. The second time she was banished when she crossed the line and played a jade flute, which belonged the emperor's relative. This banishment was also brief. Yang sent a lock of her hair to Emperor Xuanzong, and fearing that she might harm herself, he immediately called her back. The emperor had just found out that he could not bear to be parted from young GuiFei. The shortness of her banishment shows young GuiFei's lasting influence on the emperor and her hold on him. The way Xuanzong got Yang was not decent, plus Yang never got pregnant, which made her not qualified to wear the queen's crown. But in the royal palace, everyone treated and respected her as the real empress. Due to her influence on the emperor, many officials tried to win her support in order to get high positions within the court. One of these officials was An Lushan, a general and military governor of the frontier districts. Yang GuiFei promoted him, thinking that he was harmless and amiable. However, An Lushan desired the imperial throne for himself. He began to recruit men to enlarge his army. After a series of natural disasters, in the winter of 755 AD, An Lushan launched a rebellion in order to get rid of Yang Guizhong's treacherous, unjust governance. His army conquered the capital of Chang'an, and he proclaimed himself emperor. Ironically, the leader warlord An Lushan had been one of the emperor's favorite generals and had been respecting Yang GuiFei as his adoptive mother. The emperor took Yang GuiFei, some close royal family members and officials, under the protection of his royal guards and escaped toward the southwest. When the rebels caught up with them, they killed the Prime Minister Yang's cousin, her sisters, and other family members. They then threatened the emperor to kill Yang GuiFei, otherwise, they will leave the emperor and stop protecting him. One of the reasons was that they blamed her for causing the transformation of a super-prosperous empire into a country filled with war and chaos. Another important reason was that they feared that Yang GuiFei might take revenge on his family later. Based on their emperor's affection for her, she could very well do so in the future if she was still alive. Fearing for his life, the scared emperor was forced in humiliation to consent to Yang GuiFei's death. Yang GuiFei bade the emperor farewell and then either hanged herself or was strangled by one of the emperor's attendants. She was only 38. After her death, she was buried by a roadside without a coffin. In the same year, Emperor Xuanzong abdicated in favor of one of his sons. The new Tang emperor brought back Yang GuiFei's body and reburied her in Chang'an. He also asked his artisan painters to create a portrait of Yang GuiFei and hang it in the palace. He would stare at the portrait of Yang GuiFei every day of his life. Yang GuiFei has been portrayed in Chinese culture as the woman who brought down the Tang dynasty. The reason is that after the An Lushan rebellion, the dynasty slowly decayed until it fell in 907 AD. However, she is also seen as a victim of courtly intrigues. There was no evidence that Yang GuiFei had ever intervened in political decisions or participated in any factional political struggles. Besides her jealousy sometimes, she was a kind person and a sweet consort. She was beautiful enough to let a prince and an emperor fall in love with her at first sight, and talented enough to be respected as one of the most excellent musicians and dancers in the history of China. However, she did take the blame for the colossal decline and destruction that her husband and cousin had caused at the expense of her own life. Afterward, she was frequently mentioned in poems and literature, but mostly with sympathy. Some of them eulogized her beauty, talent, and her love story with Emperor Xuanzong. Others, however, wondered if the emperor ever truly loved her.